All right, Fusion to Blender, Beginner CAD 2. I'm going to draw this part similar, and hopefully I can skip a little thing since I went into everything on the first video. Okay, we're going to go ahead and minimize this. We're going to go ahead and get into it. And then again, just to kind of see it in Blender, this is the part, in Fusion, excuse me, this is the part that I'm going to go ahead and draw. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scale this to 30 millimeters. Well, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and keep because of the stuff I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and clear the origin or reset the origin. So I'm going to tab, go into edit mode, point select the point here, shift S, cursor to selected, tab out, and I'm going to alt, and then I'm going to go to object, set origin to 3D cursor. I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to select this, alt G to clear the location. Now we're back to here. Okay, now in object one, I'm going to go ahead and scale this by 15. There we go. Move that. Check in. I see my scale is at 15. I'm going to control A. I'm going to apply the scale to clear it. That's going to take me to 1. I'm going to go into tab. I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode, go into face select. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this top face and I'm going to use control I for the inset tool. Oops, screwed that up. There we go. Select that face. I, not control I, just I, excuse me. There we go for the inset tool. And it'll say the thickness. It'll only give me the thickness. I'll set the thickness to 10. There we go. I'll do that. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll actually just delete this bottom face here. I'll select X for that and delete faces, right? So then we can see that, and then we have that bottom face in here. And then I'll go ahead and I will delete this face as well. I'll delete that face. All right. And now I'm going to go to edge select mode. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to extrude this down to this edge here, and I could do it directly at 30, but I'm going to go ahead and use this to highlight some other functionality. So if we go up here, you'll see you have this snap base tool, and I'm going to go to vertex. All right, and we can set different snapping. I haven't used any of these other options yet. We'll just go ahead and go to vertex. Also, you can turn this off with this magnet looking thing right here, so you can snap during transform. Oh, it's a snip. Shift tab is the hotkey for it. Oh, that's nice. Cool. All right, but I'm just gonna generally what happens is that when you toggle this, it changes whether or not it behaves by default. But I'm gonna keep it off, but I'm gonna go ahead and activate it using the control key. All right, so I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna hit Alt and click this edges, and that's gonna select this edge loop. Alt and left clicking lets you select edge rings. Edge rings are gonna be a big part of how we dimension this. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and change my view now, and I'm just gonna do an E extrude. So I'm gonna do E, and I'm gonna pull it down, and I'm going to lock it to Z. So that's the way it's going to move up and down. And then I'm going to hold control. And I'm going to go to one of these edges. So that way when I go to control here, boom, I'll click that. And then I'm right there at the edge. And then I have that edge selected. I'll deselect that. I'll do Alt, left click here. I'll hold Shift as well to keep it going, because you can use this to shift to do multiple selections. But I'm holding Alt and Shift right now. I'm going to left click again, and then I'm going to have these edges. All right, and now I have these two edges selected. And then I'm going to bring up a special menu, the Edge menu, by pressing Control and E. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for bridge edge loops. This is, again, a very, very powerful tool. I'll bridge the edge loops, boom, and then that gets me my face. Okay, so then I have that. Now, one of the things which I want to highlight here is that, again, since these are 2D faces, one of the things that comes very, very important when you're working with STL is the directions of the faces. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go over to this button over here, not this one, and you'll see this highlight normals. So basically the idea is that these faces have directions, and it's important for how these things go. And this will show all of like my face normals. And one of the things you have to worry about when you're creating solids from meshes is because basically it's like you imagine you wrapping your solid in like aluminum foil or something like that. Your normals want to point outside, and then I can go ahead and do Alt Z to turn it transparent, and you can see all my normals are consistent. Also, I'll use this a little bit later. There's also a backface culling tool which will show if your faces go backwards. So if I go select one of these faces, I'll go back to face select. I'll use Alt N for the normals menu. If I flip it, since I turn backface culling on, you don't see that face is there. And so I'm going to turn backface culling off for a minute, but I'll use that later. But these are just different ways to check your face selection. So I'll go back to here, Alt N from a normals menu, and then I'll flip it. Okay, so then I have my part. So then I'm going to go ahead and tab out to object mode. I'll go ahead and I'll say file export STL. Go back to my desktop, and I'll just do cube export 02. I'll export that STL, and then boom, file exported successfully. And then I'll just go back into Cura so we can kind of proof it real quick. Open it, cube export 2 STL, open that up, and boom, there goes my part 30, 30, 30. Okay, so that's all well and good. And then just to kind of review from what we went last time, I'm going to go back to Blender. I'm going to select this object. Let's move you in the X this time, and I'll move you positive X's that way. I'll move you 60 that way. There we go. All right. And then again, you'll see how my origin point here is in the corner there. Actually, I'll do you. No, I'll do you more than 60. Let's move you 80. There we go. All right, move you a little bit out the way there. Okay. Now we'll go File. We will import the STL we just created. This is going to go back to my desktop. Cube export 02. Boom. There we go. And then you'll again see it here, cube export 02 in the cube, just again managing everything in the outliner. I'll tab to go to edit mode, and you'll see how it went ahead and triangulated some of these faces. So if I tab out of edit mode for this, tab back in object mode for this, you'll see that it actually it has some of these built up as quads, and that goes back to that quad and tri thing here. So just again highlighting that. But so this will work, but again, one of the things I want to speak to here is how we can kind of better organize our meshes. So this is kind of cool, like little ninja star thing. But when we talk about why we use quads versus tris, it's so we can get a cleaner mesh, and there's things that we can do to manipulate how this shows up. So, oh, excuse me. All right, so I'm going to tab out of this. Now, one thing that you can do is when you're working in the Blender scene is you can press A to select everything. So you have all that. I have all these selected: the camera, the cube I imported, and the light. Again, I'm not really going to use light and the camera in this example, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete everything. So I'll hit X, delete selected objects, yes, and then we are just back to clear. There we go, and Shift C to center my view. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and control, well, yeah, you control A to add a mesh as well. So, or Shift A, I think it is. Shift A, excuse me. Shift A, and I'm going to add a plane. There we go. Keypad period to zoom in onto it. I'm going to tab 1 for point select, and then you'll see it's still showing my faces. I'll leave that for right now. Shift S for snap, cursor to select it. Tab out in object mode, object, set origin to 3D cursor, sets my origin to 3D cursor, Alt G to clear it. Okay, and then I'm going to scale this by 15. I don't have to worry about locking it to an axis because it's a flat surface. I'll go to that, keyboard period to do that. You'll see my scale is 15. I'll select my object, Control A, apply scale, keep it 1 just to make it easier. Shift C again, I like to keep my 3D cursor in the center sometimes. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to face select my object again. I'm going to inset. I'll do this, do it again, press 10 for the thickness. I'll go back to that, click away, 3, face select, delete my face, X, delete faces, control, 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 control. Then I'll extrude, and then I'll type 30, and then boom, there is my face. Okay, or there's my cube again. So just built it another way. I've already shown the exporting again, so I'm not going to do that again, but really just want to highlight that there's different ways of getting at this. So we have that. But then there's still even a couple more ways I want to get at it. So I'm going to tab out, go back to object mode, and I'm going to delete my cube again. I'll delete, and then I'll say Shift A, and then this time I'll go ahead. I mean, I could create the cube again. I'll just do a straight up cube. I'll do that, and then I will, I'll just scale it again. I'll scale it 15, keep at, I'll just do that now. I'll tab, point select my edge, Shift S, cursor to select it. There we go. Tab out, object, set origin to 3D cursor. There we go. Tab, Alt G to clear it. Then we're back from there. So I keep setting my origin to the corner because while I'm not going to do it in this time, and then let's just get my 3D cursor back to center. Even though I'm not going to do it this time, when we talk about the snap and the increments, because in Fusion, we can set sketches and set dimensions. A lot of times when I want to be specific in Blender, I have to be one way you can do it is be very particular about how you move it. So for me, setting the origin to one of the corners kind of lets me set off against that. So right now with this one, I'm taking advantage of the fact that I know this is 30 by 30 by 30. So that way I can kind of just space with that. But in subsequent videos, I'll get more into that. So now I'm going to go into edit mode for this one. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Control R key to insert a couple of edge rings. So I'll do Control R, and then I'll use my mouse wheel to get to 2. Now, when you click once, you can do that, and then you can slide them. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click, and that's going to put them on the default, right? And then I'm going to switch around to the other side, Control R again, mouse wheel, left click. I can right click once, and then I'll right click so it's in the center. So since these edges are 30, I put in two specific edge rings, and I didn't add any extra stuff to them. They should be right in the middle. If I go 7 to go to my top, you'll see how these lines go directly with my increments. Okay, so then what I'll do is I'll go to my face select. I'll select this face here. I'll delete that face. Then I'll go down to this face here. I'll select that face as well, and then I can even go for Alt Z so you can get kind of a 3D view of it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to Alt select. I think I'm in edge. No, I want to be in edge select mode. So I'll press 2 to get in edge select mode. I'll Alt click to get that edge. You'll see because you can kind of do different rings when you pick this stuff. So that Alt and left click is a really useful thing. So I'll select that one, rotate it around, Alt Shift, right click. I'll have those two, and then I'll press Control E, and then I will bridge edge loops. And so it bridges those edge loops, and then we have that. And then if you look at all of these, you'll see that all of my faces are still outside, so it's still relatively pretty happy. So I will tab out of this to go back into object mode, and then I am going to export this one. So then I'll go File, I'll say Export STL. I'll select that object, and I'm going to export this one to Cube Export 2A. I'll export the STL again. We'll think about it. We're good. Just as a kind of sanity check, I'll go back into Cura. I will delete this object. I'm going to open it up. I'll go back to my Cube Export 2A. You'll see that. And then I'll go back to Blender. There we go. And then I'll move you. Let's move you. I'll move you in the Y this time. We'll move you negative Y. So we'll say go negative 70. There we go. Pushed it back. Okay, so then there we go. I'll do File, and then I will import again. I'm going to import the STL. I'm going to do the Cube Export 02A that I just created. Export, then I go that. Everything looks pretty much the same. You can see it in here, and then I'm going to go ahead and tab that. And now what you'll see is because of how I lined it up, it didn't give it as little bit of a, it looks a little bit more cleaner. It's still going to triangulate, because basically, you know, when you think about it, even though we're working in quads, any quad is going to be made up of 2 triangles, but the mesh here is a little bit cleaner and subdivided. And so if I think about, if I wanted to like go from, oh no, actually I'll go to the right here, Alt Z and do that. And if I wanted to select edges, I get a better way to kind of manipulate the edges of it. So kind of how you arrange and lay it out can be very helpful. So, but it's still going to just triangulate it. All right, so I'm going to do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete everything again, because I'm going to do one more. Well, actually, I'm going to do 2 more ways of creation. But I'll delete one more time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm in object mode, Shift A. I'm going to add a plane mesh, keyboard, period to zip to it, tab, point select for 1, Shift S, cursor to select it. I'll tab back in object mode, go to object, set origin to 3D cursor. There we go. Alt G to clear my location. There we go again. And then I'm going to scale by 15. I could go in there. Well, I'll just demonstrate this one more time. So generally what I could do here is I could apply the scale to go back to 1, but just to highlight something I did before, I'm going to tab into this. Actually, let me move my cursor to the center. There we go. I'm in edit mode. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to make my pivot point the 3D cursor, and then I'm going to scale by 15. All right, so it keeps my size the same, but now when I tab out, my scale is still 1. All right, so we'll go back to that. Now what I want to do is I'd like to add edge loops like I did before, but if I go here and do Control R, since it's just the, well, I got to go in edit mode. There we go. And I'll go in for edge select mode. So if I go here and I try to do Control R, it's not really going to give me anything in a way that I can see it. But since what I can do is I'll go back, I'll use the Control E menu, which is the edge menu, and then I'm going to go to subdivide. All right, and I mentioned this before when I added some of my tools, is that when you do different commands, it'll bring up this little menu down here. And with the subdivide, I want to do 2 cuts. And again, just like when you add meshes and you do different things, it'll give you this little menu, and then it'll add stuff to it when you want to. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select this face, All right, yeah, I'll select this. Yeah, I'll select this individual face. Go back to my face select. I'll delete that. Delete my faces. Go back to face select, and I'll control, 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 control. I could just grab all of these, but I'll just grab them individually. I will do extrude. Extrude defaults to the normal plane, and I will do 30. There we go. And then let me check my. Yep, and then all of my faces are still pretty good. Okay, so this pretty much gets to the same way. Again, I could, on what I did the first time was I brought it in with the cube and then I sliced the edge loops. This time I did the plane and I subdivided, so I'm not going to extrude it again. But now with all of this said, I do want to give it one more way of messing with this, right? So, and that's by using a modifiers and then by doing a Boolean combine. So like union, difference, or intersection if you've ever seen that, because I also want to talk about modifiers as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Alt Z to go to my middle, to go to my transparent X-ray viewpoint, and I'm going to go to vertex select. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the orthographic views. Oh, this is my front view here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these just to X delete these vertices. All right, there we go, X vertices, and then I'll go to my right view, and then I'll just use these to delete these vertices. All right, and we'll delete these, and then we will delete these, and I'll say X vertices. Okay, cool. So now I have this, and I'm actually looking, if you look at where all of my normals is, because of how it's built, the normals are pointing inside. But then what I'll do is I'm going to go back to the front, I'll select this top here, and then what you can also use is you can also press the F key to fill a face. Now, because of how all this is how all of this is laid out, I want you to note that all of my normals are pointing inside. Okay, so I have that, and they're basically all backwards. Now, one of the things that's interesting is I'll turn X-ray mode off. Alt Z, there we go, so you can see it. But if you look for the normals, you don't see them even though they're turned on. But if I go here and if I turn on backface culling, what backface culling does is whenever you're looking at a mesh, and if you're looking at it from the back side, you see through it because you're looking at it through the back side. So if I rotate around, you'll see I see the different faces. So again, just going back to functionality that I want to highlight in Blender, this is a good way to kind of check and proof your STL files, because one of the most common files you can have with STLs when you're trying to put them in a slicer for 3D printing is you'll have flipped faces. So I just want to say that this is a way that you can mess with that. So now what I'm going to do is whereas I've been using meshes and doing edge operations and vertex operations on them, what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to create an entirely separate object. So we'll leave this right here for right now, and then I'm actually just going to go ahead and hide that to get it out the way. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do Shift A, and then I'm going to insert another cube, right? And then I'll have my my size down here, and I'll just make my size 30 just to make it here. There we go, 30. And I could set the location and align it, but I'll just leave that alone for right now. Generate UVs, we'll talk about that later. I'll leave that, tab, I'll go to my favorite tool here, Shift S, cursor to select it, tab back into object mode, my object is selected, object set origin to 3D cursor, origin to my 3D cursor, Alt G to clear. All right, so now if I now make this visible, you can't see it, I can just change Z to my actual wireframe view. You'll see that I have it inside of it, and I'll just go back to my solid and then Alt Z in here. So actually one more thing I want to do before I do this, because of how the Boolean operation is going to work, I'm going to go ahead and hide my initial cube here, and I'm going to use this plane, which is now a rectangular prism. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my front here, and I'm going to select these edges, and I'm going to grab them, move Z in the 10, right? So now also I just use that to select those faces. I'm going to go to my, I use the vertexes that make up that face. I'm actually just going to select that one as well, grab Z, and I'll just do -10. So again, lots of different ways that you can do stuff. I'll tab out to get back into object mode, and then I'll turn my object back on and turn off X-ray. So basically these things overlap. I'm going to go ahead and turn off backface culling too, because that's going to bug me for a little bit. There we go. But this is highlighting that these faces are flipped. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply a Boolean modifier. So I'm going to go over here to this menu, and generally modifiers are applied to the mesh. They're applied to an object basically. So I have my cube object and the plane object, which is now a rectangular prism, which I've extruded. So I'm going to apply this to the cube. So generally when you think about modifiers, you want to think about what you're going to apply them to. So I'm going to go to this little wrench here, and it's going to say modifiers, and I'm going to say add modifier. I'm going to click add modifier. I'm going to go to generate, and then I'm going to go Boolean. And so with Boolean, you have intersect, you have union, and you have difference. I'm going to do a difference. and then the operand is going to be my cube. So the operand I want to use here, or the object, excuse me, the operand type is going to be object. I want to go ahead and use that plane. All right. Now, um, modifiers are non-destructive, meaning that they will preview your behavior, but they won't actually go into effect until you apply them. So again, the cube is what the modifier is applied to. The plane is what is the body that the modifier is going to use for. So if I hide the plane, now nothing's going to happen right now, and that's okay. What I want to do here is I want to, while this modifier is here and hide it, I'm actually going to keep this because we're in object mode, and I'm going to go to this cube in edit mode. And this is why those faces are important. So if we go back to Alt Z, you can see I have those. So essentially, it uses these faces to do math on the calculations, because basically when you're rendering all of this stuff, it's taking all of these points. It's one big math problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the A key to select all of my faces, and then I'm going to use Alt and N for the normals menu. Now, for right here, I'm going to flip, but you can do recalculate outside and recalculate inside. But I'm going to go ahead and flip. So flipping the normals, what that does is that makes it to where now all of these are facing outside, because when they're facing inside, that means the outside of the face is on the inside, so it messes up the math. But now it's properly regarded. So now once I get out of that, I'll get out of edit mode. Now watch what happens when I bring my cube back. There's a hole right in the middle of it. That's why faces are important, because it helps with the math of what it's going to do. And I have my face in there. So there's one more thing I want to show before I actually apply this modifier. So, but first thing is the faces, because now it'll show my hole in there, and then I can go here. If I click on my cube, then you'll see my modifier, and then I can change the visibility of it and things like that. But one more thing I want to change before I actually apply the modifier. Because if I tab here and if I go into edit mode, I'm still looking at the solid cube. None of my actual geometry has changed. All right, so I'll tab into that. Now what I want to do is I'll hide the cube, and I want to go back to that plane. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edit mode for this plane. And what you want to be mindful about when you're doing like Booleans, this is kind of like in the last video when you saw that 0.001. You saw that I extended them past. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my front view, turn X-ray on, and I'm going to move these back, grab Z -10. There you go. And actually, if I have it on increment, I can do grab Z, and then if I hold the control key, it'll actually snap. So that just goes back to that snap base. So I'll just do that, and then I'll click that. All right. So now if I tab that out, turn X-ray off, and then turn my cube back on so my modifier is in there, you'll see that it does a little weird thing with the Boolean, because those faces are right on top of each other. So when you're working with this stuff, you want to be mindful of where things are when they're sitting on top of each other, because they can kind of screw the math up. So one of the reasons I extended those paths was to make sure that the Boolean wouldn't have any trouble. I mean, I could take it and work with it and do all this stuff, but you want to be mindful of that whenever you're working with Boolean modifiers. When doing combinations, intersects, unions, all that stuff is a good way to make your models, but just make sure you have some overlap, because without getting into it more than I already have here, it makes the math easier. So I'm just going to undo a couple times to get my part back to here. There we go, tab, and then I will move out of object mode again. I will move that, and then here we go. I'm going to hide my operand. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my cube. I'm going to apply the modifier. So even though I see it like this, if I go into edit mode for my cube, it still looks like a solid object. But if I go to my modifiers menu for my cube here, and I go to this and I hit this drop down menu, and then I hit apply, all right, now I've actually put it in there. Mind you, my operand is still there, so I'm going to hide that. That's one thing you have to think about when you're working with modifiers. But when I actually go to it, I'll hit tab, and then you actually see my faces, right? So now also one of the things here is that when you're working with this, you'll hear about like n-gons and things like this. Technically, this isn't, you see how this is what, made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but it's flat, so it all kind of works out. But one thing you can do is if I select all the faces, I can hit Control T and it'll triangulate, but then it kind of looks closer to what we got here before. But when you actually think about what's going on below the hood here, it really breaks it down to triangles, but again, this got me here. But you can kind of see with the ones that we did before how the lines were kind of laid out and things like this. So it really depends on what you're kind of going for with editing, because anything will work. But one of the things that you want to be thinking about as you're creating these objects is how you're laying out your vertices and how it's going to have to be, or how it's going to be set up, and will that be conducive for you making changes. So I'm not going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and not export this one, just because I've done that a couple times and I don't want to repeat that. But there we go. This is a couple different views of how to create part 2, and hopefully this was useful to you, and I'll see you guys on the next one.